Hey guys, Yoshi here, and in today's video I'm going to be covering a parted guide on how one might be able to get better in Destiny PvP. And by all means, I'm not the greatest PvPer alive. There are definitely other PvP content creators that are much better than I, but I do believe I am better than the average. I am an above average player. So I believe some of the tips that I'm going to be giving in this video will definitely benefit some, might not benefit everyone, but it's definitely worth me sharing these tips that I've been using my entire Destiny career. To start off this guide, I'm going to be talking about armor stats, distribution focus, and exotic armor pieces. So I'll be talking about what stats you should be focusing on getting high and what armor pieces you need to be using. The best armor pieces to be using generally have a 60 plus total base stat or higher. And the base stat is the stat displayed before any mods are slotted and or before the armor piece has been masterworked fully. So if you notice all the armor pieces here, they have this gold border. This means they've been masterworked. And if you come in here, this little indicator here means that it's been masterworked. And if an armor piece has been masterworked, you get this yellow bar in each of these columns or distributions, these rows. They're not columns, rows. Um, but each of these yellow bars adds +2 to each row, and you get an overall of +12 to your total stat. You also get these armor mod sockets here, which give a +10 to each of these different slots. So since I have the discipline mod slotted, that gives me a +10 to my discipline stat right here. So that also increases my total stat. Normally, if you didn't have a mod socketed or it was masterworked, it would look like this, where it's not masterworked and it doesn't have a mod uh, socketed in the mod socket, and its total base roll is here, which is 60, which is pretty good. You're going to be wanting to aim for 60 or higher stat rolled armor. Many good pieces of armor can be obtained from the seasonal pass. So if you have the seasonal pass, you can get these higher stat roll armor pieces. I think I got this glove piece from the seasonal pass this season. It had a very high base recovery stat, so I snagged it. This helmet, even though this is an ornament I'm using, this helmet is from last season. It had a very good overall distribution of stats, so I picked it up, and it was also from the season pass. So uh, some pretty nice perks of having access to the season pass. However, you can obtain other high stat rolls from PvE and other PvP sources, such as Iron Banner and the Leviathan raid, as their armor pieces seem to consistently drop higher total base stats than other sets. However, your experience may differ from mine, but I've had the most luck from turning in Leviathan tokens to Benedict, and I got this mask here, base roll of 61, and I think this one was like a base roll of 65 before I masterworked it and slotted the mod into it, so pretty good. However, your experience may vary from mine, especially since this season Bungie has adjusted the high stat roll drop rates amongst all random armor pieces. I believe I got this armor piece this season. This wasn't from the season pass, but this one dropped randomly and it dropped as a 60. Normally that'd be much rarer. Normally you'd be getting things like 56, 56, or like I think lower, like yeah, 50, 51, but these are blues, so blues are an exception. But I did get these two random. This one was a 62 and this is a 64. So yeah, you definitely are going to have better luck this season and in future seasons and getting better stat rolled armor pieces. Next up, I want to talk about the stat types. So we're going to go over each of the different stat types. First off is mobility, increases your jump height and movement speed. Next is resilience, which increases your overall health. Next is recovery, which increases your health regeneration time after taking damage. So if you have a higher number, you're going to be recovering your health much faster than someone who has a lower recovery stat. Next up is discipline, which decreases your grenade cooldown time. Intellect, which increases your super game time or decreases your cooldown, if you will. It just makes it so you get your supers faster than someone who would have a lower number than yours. And of course, last but not least, is strength, which decreases your melee cooldown time. However, you will notice that these first three stats, they factor into each of the characters or class abilities. So for Warlocks, Recovery factors into their Rift ability stat. For Titans, Resilience factors into their Barricade ability timer, and for Hunters, Mobility factors into their Dodge ability timer. So depending on your class that you're playing, it might be beneficial for you to spec more points into each of these following columns. Next up, I want to talk about is stat distributions. And personally, I believe you should focus most of your time on finding armor pieces that give you high stats in mobility and in recovery. I believe they are the two most important stats that you can have at their highest capacity. Recovery definitely makes it a lot easier to disengage and re-engage in fights, and mobility just makes it so you move faster, so which can be very beneficial for transversing maps quickly. However, for the rest of your points, I'd recommend splitting them into discipline and strength. I would recommend saving a few points into intellect. I would recommend getting around 40 intellect so you have like a 4-minute cooldown on your super. If you don't have 40, I think at 0 it's like a 7-minute cooldown, which is pretty bad. If you're not getting kills, then you're definitely going to have your super last. You want to have 40 or 50. That generally speeds up the time that you get your super. You might even have your super first if you're at 40 or 50, and depending if you're getting a lot of kills during your match. And resilience, I don't believe resilience is very good unless you can hit 60 resilience, so you can tank a 2 crit uh, thorn. I definitely recommend staying away from resilience. If you can't reach 60, then it's rather useless pouring your distributions into the stat. And of course, you can get hidden stat buffs from different mods. So the traction mod adds +5 to your mobility, but also adds a hidden buff of +10 to your overall mobility. So you only see +5 on here, but you're actually getting an additional +10 to your mobility. And if you see here, I'm using Powerful Friends, a mod from Season of Dawn. I'm not sure if you can still get this mod anymore, but if you do have it and you have an arc piece of armor, you can equip it to your arc piece of armor, and it adds a plus 20 mobility stat to that piece of armor and to your kit. So it's pretty strong. And in addition to armor mods, there are certain weapons that you can use. So lightweight frames, you see here a mountaintop and the weapon next to it, spare rations. They are lightweight frames. They have superb handling and they move faster, or you move faster with this weapon equipped. So when you have mountaintop or spare rations, you will notice that you move faster. So it gives you a little stealth buff to your mobility stat. So as for exotic armor, don't worry about getting high stat rolls. So don't worry about getting like a 64 base stat roll of your exotic piece that you're using. It's pretty hard to get that lucky to get not only a high roll armor piece, although they did buff the exotics that dropped this season to they want them to drop at like 60. But if you do get lucky and you get a piece of armor that has a high base stat and it's an armor piece that you use, so like geomags, these geomags I think have a base stat of 60 before the mods are applied to them. I use Geomags because I like using Chaos Reach. They definitely play into my playstyle, so I definitely will be using these Geomags. However, if you get an exotic armor piece like I have these Storm Dancers here, they're not very good in PvP. They are high stat roll. I am going to keep them for maybe the future, but I wouldn't use it because even though it's high stat roll, it's a waste of exotic slot. So you'll notice here my transversives, they are pretty low. Base stat for these are the collection rolls, so they're like 45 or 48 or something like that. Pretty low, but it's all I got, and since it's all I got, I'm gonna use it. So don't feel like just because your exotic armor piece is low stat roll that it's worthless or something like that. It doesn't matter for the exotic piece. If you're able to get high stat rolls in your other legendary armor pieces, then you can definitely compensate for having a low stat rolled exotic armor piece. And I do want to cover some exotics you might find ease in using for each of the classes. I'm not going to go too in depth, but I'm just going to give you a general reason to why these exotics may be good. And you see I am a Warlock main, so I'm going to talk about the Warlock pieces first. Definitely recommend using Transversive Steps. They buff your sprint, and your sprint reloads your current weapon. What it doesn't say is that your slide is also buffed, so your slide distance is buffed, and your crouch walk speed is also buffed when you're wearing these boots. They they're incredibly viable when using shotguns. They help you close the distance between you and your opponent. So shotgunning is a very effective weapon to be using with these exotics. Um, Exotic boots. And the next thing I recommend Warlocks use are Ophidians. Ophidians are pretty damn good still, I'd say. They improve your weapon ready speed, reload, and melee range. So they increase your melee range by, I think, 1 meter. They give you an almost outlaw-like effect on your reload speed, so you don't have to be constantly running enhanced arms loaders like I do here. And overall, they just make your weapons ready up faster when you take them out. So they're pretty useful if you're sniping and you don't have like a quick draw perk on your weapon. So my Revoker doesn't have quick draw on it, but I kind of get like a fake quick draw effect when I use Ophidians. So Ophidians can definitely help you get out of a pickle if you need them or if you're going to rely on them. For hunters, I'd recommend using Dragon Shadow or Stompies. Dragon Shadow, if you don't know already, it reloads your weapons, all your weapons, and gives you increased weapon handling. It doesn't matter what type of dodge you're using as well. It's anytime you dodge, it reloads all your weapons and gives you increased weapon handling. So you can use Gambler's dodge with it instead of the reload dodge. So pretty useful. Stompies kind of like transversive steps, but they allow you to increase your vertical jump play. They also they buff your sliding, so they're pretty good for shotgunning or just moving around the map quickly. And then for Titans, I'd recommend the new exotic. I believe they are called Citans or Chitons Ramparts. I'm not sure how to say that. Don't quote me on it. But those exotic gauntlets, they allow you to shoot through your barricades. It's a pretty nifty feature, and enemies can't shoot through your barricade, so it gives you a little one-way wall. Doom Archers, which are similar to Transversive Steps, they buff your sliding, and I don't think they buff your sprinting really. They might, I haven't used them in a while, but they do buff, they have been buffed recently so that the arc chaining is up from 12 meters to 20 meters, so you can arc chain people through walls and platforms with the exotic, so they are pretty good now. And I'd also recommend using Synthoceps, since Synthoceps, they pair really well with the um, middle tree arc Titan, the Thunder Crash super. It buffs your melee damage when you're surrounded, and the middle tree's melee will one-shot players if you're surrounded and if you have Synthoceps on. So they are a pretty good exotic if you like punching things as a Titan. So that pretty much covers the first part of this guide on armor stats, distribution focus, and exotic armor. And in the next part of this guide, I will be focusing on your weapon choice. I'll be giving a little introduction into the special weapons available, the primary weapons you might want to be using uh, in combination for weapon combos, how you want to combo off of the special you're using, and I'll be talking about these weapons that you might be using based off of the exotics you're using. So if you remember, I said that transversives pair well with shotguns because you can close the distance between you and your enemy a lot better than other exotics. So I'll be talking about things like that, and I will be going over a little about meta special weapons and what special weapons you might find the most success in, as they are the top tiered used weapons for this current meta.